Participate and share this evening as we try to remember some important dates in history prior to the events of this evening with the reenactment of this play. So first of all, this particular play is a reenactment of an actual event, a true historical event that happened in Hawaii in 1897. Miriam, like Michael said, was a writer with the, I think, San Francisco Examiner, if I remember right. And she comes to Hawaii, and her main objective was to kind of find out, well, what's going on in Hawaii in regards to this question of annexation. Many of you may not know, but in fact, the question of Hawaii really was a huge question for the United States. At that time, the United States were dealing with this question, would they remain a republic or would they become an empire itself? That really was the question that was put in front of the United States. So much of the newspapers across the United States were looking at Hawaii, examining the history of Hawaii, kind of asking that question, whether or not the question of even putting Hawaii to the Senate for ratification, not just being legal, but really being something that was moral in regards to the standards of the United States. As we understand the U.S. principles of law and the Constitution, of course, the idea, the consent of the governed and to be governed themselves. But let's step back to a little bit of the history. Kind of move up, standing on stages. So if we kind of go back, just running through a real quick history, we realize when we talk about the Hawaiian Kingdom period, and we look at the year of 1810 as really the basis and the founding of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And that's because this is recognized when Kamehameha is said to have unified all of the Hawaiian Islands after the cession of Kauai under him. So begins the Hawaiian Kingdom period. Well, Kamehameha, of course, dies and is followed by his son, who Liho, who in his tenure as the new Mo'i, as the King of Hawaii, actually takes a trip to England to meet with, I think, King George V at that time, really to clarify what the relationship would be between the Hawaiian Kingdom and Great Britain. Now, many of you may not know, but actually the Hawaiian Kingdom was considered a protectorate, actually, and seated itself under the control of Great Britain at that time. But it kind of was still in this kind of very unclarified relationship. And so this is why Liho takes a trip to England. It wasn't because he was out there taking a vacation. He was actually out there as the head of the Hawaiian Kingdom to kind of clarify a relationship at this point. Unfortunately, of course, he and his wife Mamalu, they both passed away in Great Britain at that time. And then the kingdom is passed to his younger brother, Kaori-Lei, who becomes Kamehameha III. And really, it's during the period of Kamehameha III's reign where you have the greatest changes that occur in the Hawaiian Kingdom. It's under his reign where Kamehameha III would transform the so-called Hawaiian Kingdom from a autocratic, where he is the, he is the state, he is the government, he is the voice, the legislature. And in 1839, the Hawaiian Kingdom is transformed via Declaration of Rights. Following that, in 1840, the first Hawaiian Constitution is enacted. Now, what's important about that, from 1840 on, the Hawaiian Kingdom is no longer a kingdom that's ruled by just under the powers of one king, but in fact becomes a constitutional monarchy, and really based upon the British model. And you have the legislature, you have the judiciary, of course, and you have the executive branch, the king, who also had a privy council, just like the British system. It's also a period where education transforms the Hawaiian Islands. The Hawaiian people at this time, during the reign of Kamehameha III, are considered, in fact, the most literate society in the world. The education is held at a premium. And virtually in 20 years, the Hawaiians become totally literate. Hawaiians read newspapers and read news from all over the world. So if you actually got a chance to look at the Hawaiian language newspapers, you'd see the kind of stuff they're actually reading. Now, you gotta compare this to other great countries at that time. If you look at Great Britain, France, Italy, you would realize their literacy rate, in fact, was way, way lower than the Hawaiian Kingdom. And of course, if you look back at the Hawaiian Kingdom also was one of the first countries that had compulsory education, which meant that everybody had to go to school. Education wasn't just for the aristocracy and the rich and the wealthy. Education was something that belonged to everybody. So the first thing I always tell our people, Hawaiians, to remember, education has always been part of our worldview. Education is something new for Hawaiians. Education is something we're returning to. Now, Kamehameha III, unfortunately, when he dies, the kingdom has passed through his nephew, in a sense, who was manai by him, and that's Kamehameha IV, Alexander Liho, who marries Queen Emma. And this is Liho Queen Emma. He passes on that boss and goes to his older brother, Kamehameha V, my brain just went disappeared.
And I got that on
Lot Kapuaiwa. And he becomes Kamehameha V, and actually has a very strong reign. And he dies, unfortunately, without naming an heir. And following the Hawaiian Constitution at that time, they elected the first elected mo'i of Hawaii, that was Lunalilo, who was really the people's choice, loved by the people. He dies after 11 months of a reign, although a very beloved king, and he dies, and they have another election, and this, of course, is when Kaleikoa is elected king. Kaleikoa actually is one of the more important monarchs, and he kind of takes the Hawaiian kingdom, not just from the big, little islands, little Pacific, but he actually goes out to the world. And Kaleikoa is the first head of state to sorry, just a second. Continue. No. Okay, I got a few minutes, I guess. So they've been throwing me out already. Yeah, so. But yeah, I was going to say that Kaleikoa is the first head of state to actually go and circumnavigate the world. He also set up and becomes the International Postal Service. When he travels across the United States, he's the first head of state to dine at the White House, or foreign head of state. He goes across Europe as a huge entourage. He went out, he used to hang out and have dinner with people like Alexander Graham Bell, and then people like Thomas Edison, and some of the more famous people of his time. He goes, in fact, to India, to Singapore, in fact, eventually to Japan before he comes to Hawaii. He actually tries to set up a confederation of Pacific nations under Hawaii, in the sense of kind of, as he saw around the world, if the Pacific people were going to survive, he understood that we have to kind of unite all our various nation island kingdoms together. Unfortunately, in 1887, Kaleikoa has weakened as he was. Many of the plantation descendants and owners at that time, American missionary descendants, basically, as we say, the point of Aganchu was called the Bayonet Constitution, push in an illegal constitution, which really takes away a lot of power from Kaleikoa and really the Hawaiian people. First of all, it takes away voting rights from many of the people who did not qualify because of not having enough cash. It also allowed foreigners who were non-citizens of the Hawaiian Kingdom to vote as long as they had enough cash. So you can see what the point of the change in the Constitution was all about. He dies, his sister, Lydia Makaeha Liliu takes the reign in 1891. The first thing that Liliu does is actually takes a tour of all the islands to go hear from the people. What does she hear from the people? We need a new constitution. We want to have a right back to vote, more participation in the government. And as the great Liliu Kalani has always said, the voice of the people is the voice of God. And this is what the reason is for her actions in 1893. So in 1893, January, of course, she's getting ready to promulgate a new constitution. And this becomes the catalyst for the so-called rebels to enact their plan in conspiracy with representatives of the United States, General Stevens, in the landing of U.S. Marines, later called by President Cleveland an act of war. Now, what's important about this history is that Queen Liliuokalani never gives up to the provisional government. That's part of the mythology. In fact, who does she yield to? To the superior forces of the United States forever, until such time when they present the evidence to go reinstate. In other words, very clear. She never gives up to the provisional government. She turns to the United States and says, hey, I'm going to temporarily give over my power, her executive power. Remember now, she doesn't have the power to give away the whole country. She's just the executive of the branch. Yeah. So, but she used the United States first of all, and she only used temporarily. You can actually read it for yourself. Or take a Hawaiian studies class, you can learn about it. Yeah. Now, following this becomes a crux of the matter. President Cleveland calls the act here an act of war. He sends a representative, James Blount, who comes to Hawaii, does a huge investigation. You have what's called the Blount Report, and you can read that on the web. 440 pages, gives you a detailed blow of what went on at the time. The provisional government, when they realized that they couldn't move forward with a treaty, which were the goal, as Cleveland shut it down, they transformed themselves to call themselves and become the Republic of Hawaii. The Republic of Hawaii. Later on in 1897, now, after a change of administration, Cleveland is out, new president comes in. Which president is coming in now? McKinley comes in, yeah, great expansionist, imperialist. They go and they negotiate a treaty, that again it's the Republic of Hawaii with the President McKinley. Now we must remember ourselves that according to the United States Constitution, their own Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Subsection 2, it says basically, the executive branch, they have the right to negotiate a treaty. But a treaty is only a treaty when it's ratified by 2/3 of the Senate. This is where we find ourselves at this moment, at this play. The Hawaiians, in reaction to what's going on, they're organizing. And many of the two leagues, Aloha Āina and Āina, and really it's the women. The women go out to the community. And when they go out to gather support via the 2A petitions, as you heard earlier, people come out from all over, from the valleys, on Kangu, where you have you. They didn't need any slick campaigns, they didn't need fancy commercials. People came out to affix their names to these petitions to basically say they do not give consent to the United States to take Hawaii. These petitions are then later taken and put on the Senate floor, along with the Queen's official protests. And what happens to the proposed annexation in 1897? What happens to the petition again, to the treaty? It fails. Repeat, the treaty fails. As I tell my students, if you can find a treaty, you get an A in my class. But I know you will keep on digging and you won't find one. Anyway, so this is where we find ourselves right at this moment. Well, the Hawaiians are organizing. Yeah, their right of free speech, their right forever to document how they feel about what's going on in regards to the proposed annexation of the Hawaiian Islands. We ready? Right on.